Hey everybody, welcome to Dispatches, an adventure motorcycle ride aimed at breaking down the stigma surrounding post-traumatic stress disorder within the veteran and first responder communities. My name is Mike Terry. I am a Canadian Armed Forces veteran, and I've been affected by operational stress injury and post-traumatic stress disorder for close to 20 years. I started Dispatches in 2018. I retired from the forces and immediately started to see the effects of isolation and withdrawal. So I started to share my story and set about encouraging others to share theirs so that those peer voices could help break down the stigma and end the silence that leads to isolation, withdrawal, and suicidal ideation. So that's the background on Dispatches. What I want to talk to you about today is reaching out, specifically reaching out when you're in crisis. And like so many people, I'm really good at giving advice and really terrible at following my own. I'm very much somebody, when I start to struggle, I kind of just, withdraw, kind of look to my own resources to try and figure things out. And that's a lot of us. I know a lot of people, everybody says, oh, reach out if you need help. And I think I had a buddy, Steve, who put it best, in terms of not following your own advice. He said, when he had young soldiers, he'd tell them over and over, look after your mental health. Don't be afraid to go to mental health. Don't be afraid to look after it. Meanwhile, he's struggling silently with a lot of things and essentially, not following our own advice because it's hard. Let's be honest, reaching out when you're in crisis, especially for veterans, first responders, where some more of those type A personalities, it's hard admitting that you need help. It's hard admitting that you're struggling, and it's hard sometimes to even articulate what you need. So I'm going to talk about an instance where I actually managed to reach out and kind of what came of that. I'm going to talk about some of the barriers to reaching out and some of the things I noticed about that. So first off, I released in 2018. My release was not smooth. It really honestly was just another traumatic experience for me in a whole lot of ways. But without getting into specifics, there was a great deal of trouble with moral injury and what they call sanctuary trauma. The Canadian Forces was my sanctuary. That was my safe place. And when that stopped being the case, there's something called sanctuary trauma. So I experienced sanctuary trauma from that. To this day, I am, a few days shy, not, less than a week shy of it being exactly 2 years since I released. And to this day, my release and the circumstances surrounding it are an issue that I have a really hard time talking about. And I really hate the way I just said issue. I don't know why that happened. Anyway, moving on. Issue, how pretentious. So yeah, it was. It's a huge thing. It's something I'm actively trying to work through, but it's difficult. So in December of last year, 2019, I got some input with regards to my release and some of the ongoing. Basically conflict with that. And a couple of things. One, December, not a great time for a lot of veterans, especially if you're isolated and not feeling terribly connected. There were other things going on in life that were very challenging. And this was news I wasn't entirely not expecting to get. I kind of expected the news I got. But I didn't expect it for probably a good 8 months. I didn't actually expect to have even gotten that news yet. So I wasn't prepared for it. And I'll be honest, it was absolutely devastating. I just a complete kind of breakdown because all these things that I've had trouble addressing or been avoiding just come crashing in all at once, So typically what I would do is I'd just try and work through it myself. I'd just, soldier on, pick yourself up by the bootstraps and carry on. And in this instance, I decided not to do that. So I actually reached out to a friend, and probably within 15, 20 minutes of receiving this news and having this massive reaction, I got on the phone, because I am geographically isolated from pretty well everybody I served with. So I got on the phone with this friend of mine, and we talked for probably an hour, I think. And I'm going to tell you that made all the difference in the world. Did it still suck? Yes. Did it still affect me? Yes. But was I in the midst of this kind of complete, I don't want to say meltdown like it's a tantrum, but no, I wasn't affected to the point where, this is something like, if I hadn't reached out to somebody, I would have felt those effects of it. It would have affected me in terms of not being able to function the way I would want to for a longer period of time. And basically after about an hour of talking with her, I was kind of, I would say good to go and not affected, but I was able to carry on and function in a way that was, I'm going to say healthy as could be under the circumstances. So a couple of things. It's important to reach out, absolutely, and it's hard to do. And what are some of the reasons that it's hard to do? Well, it's hard because I already mentioned not being able to admit you're struggling, not being able to, admit weakness or any of those things. And those are common. Those are internal, very internalized. That's ego, and that's pride, and that's social conditioning, whatever you want to call it. A man doesn't cry, a man doesn't get affected by these things. A soldier doesn't cry or get affected by these things. So it's all that bullshit, for lack of a better word. So there's that. There's also the fact that I know a lot of my friends and a lot of the people I connect with are likewise struggling or have their issues. And there's this feeling of, I don't want to burden somebody else with my problems. And I think that can be generally, I don't want to burden other people with my problems, but it can also be a strong, empathetic reaction to knowing, yeah, this is a veteran and this is somebody who shared a lot of these experiences, and I know they have these issues, and I don't want to throw more on their plate. So that's really a big part of the struggle of reaching out to the people you need to reach out to. In terms of who you reach out to now, there's a list of people I could talk to, I'm sure, who would generally understand where I'm coming from. They know me, they know the culture, they shared that culture with me, and they'd be more than happy to talk to me. There's no doubt in my mind. I know they're out there. This person in particular was somebody who shared this particular experience with me. They were there through the whole thing. And they have their own issues they're dealing with. And there was a time where I was being so affected by my release and the things that were going on just before my release that they were being affected by what was happening to me, and vice versa. Because the things that were going on with them just weren't right. And I was affected by that. And it came to a point where we kind of talked to each other and said, hey, like we got to get a bit of distance. I've got to disengage because what's affecting you is affecting me so terribly. It's just compounding all these issues, which was, again, a very healthy thing in the moment. But that definitely sticks in your mind when I go, oh, I got to call, who do I want to call and talk to about this? Well, this person who was there with me through it. And then there was, it was in the moment before I picked up that phone, there was this massive struggle of, do I call her or do I not call her? And in the end, I did call her. So, and it was hard to do. And there was that worry of, am I just going to be burdening my friend with something that she doesn't need to be burdened with? But as much as I could have reached out to other friends that I served with who know me, who understand the culture, who understand a lot of these things, the benefit of talking to her is the fact that I don't have to rehash the events. She knows the events. She's very familiar with the events. She's very familiar with how I was affected throughout the whole thing. So the great thing was, because sometimes you just need somebody to listen. And I could talk about my feelings, and I could talk about reactions, and I could talk about the event to a certain point. I could talk about this newest development without having to go through the entire history. And I think that's a really important part of it. Because one of two things will happen. If I talk to somebody who doesn't have all those details and I don't fill them in on the details, they're basically, they're almost into that cheerleader role. Yeah, they can be a sympathetic ear and they can help, and I'm not diminishing the value in that, but it's not going to get right to the core issue. If you do fill them in, so I'm having this massive reaction and I decide to call one of my buddies who wasn't there for that. And I'm having this massive reaction, and there's that need to fill in a lot of the backstory. I'm actually exposing myself to reliving that in the moment. And there are times when that can be, where that's necessary. You talk about therapy and counseling. Confronting those things and those instances is important. In the midst of those moments where it feels like it's a crisis right now, reliving that entire experience and trying to explain that to somebody might not be the best thing. So by speaking with her, I avoided that. And if we want to extend who you reach out to a civilian audience or people who aren't from the culture you didn't serve with, and all of us have families, loved ones, friends who are saying, hey man, just reach out, just get in touch. But, and those intentions are absolutely pure and admirable and honorable, and they mean it. And I'm sure they're frustrated when we don't do it, but that's part of the struggle there too, is trying to explain the culture, trying to explain the event itself or how it affected you is going to take up all that energy, and it's a daunting task. And sometimes it just feels like, yeah, you can talk to people who care about you and everything, but it feels like, well, they're just kind of a cheerleader, which again, sometimes is appropriate in the midst of crisis, not always. So I reached out, despite all those misgivings, and within an hour, I was able to carry on in the most healthy way possible. So that's the story of triumph, and that's those are the barriers to reaching out. But damn, it was still hard to do, So what did I learn from all that? Well, one, I learned I am capable of doing it. And that's probably the first time I've done that ever. 2 years of working away at this and 20 years of dealing with operational stress injury. And that's the first time I ever did that. And it takes effort, so if I had to impart any advice, I would say a couple things. Do it, suck it up, swallow your pride, and reach out to somebody if you can. If you have somebody who is familiar with the events or the circumstances that are affecting, your reaction you're having right now, even better. Those are the perfect people to reach out to. And in saying that, what I came to realize is, it's a good idea to stay connected to those people when things are okay. So in my case, with my friend, she and I had remained connected. We had intentionally distanced each other during some of these events for, our own protection. But we had stayed connected. So I was very lucky to have her as somebody who knew all the ins and outs of that. That was incredibly effective. So if there's something affects you, but it's not really affecting you right now, maybe now is a good time to get in touch with other people who shared that experience or were similarly affected, or that if you become affected in such a way that you need to reach out, that there's somebody who you don't have to go into backstory and you don't have to go into explaining all these things. You can just focus on what's happening in the here and now. So that would be kind of my piece of advice on maintaining those relationships and connections outside of crisis. And I'm incredibly fortunate that I did that. That being said, I did the right thing in that instance. I need to continue to work at making those connections outside of crisis. I need to work at just staying connected to people in general. And again, I'm not disparaging, other veterans, people who didn't share that experience. I'm not disparaging friends and family from saying, I support you, open up to me, because those things are absolutely important. And those are things that I struggle with and I have to work on. But that first step was really so effective and so much easier because of that shared experience and the fact that I didn't have to go into backstory. So yeah, You know, I end a lot of videos by saying, you know, if you're in trouble, reach out. If you are in a good place, reach in if you think somebody's struggling. So I'm just going to say reach out even if you're not struggling. Just try and get connected. And by saying this right now, I have to admit the fact that I need to work on that. I need to work a lot harder at that, as I think many of us do. So yeah, that's my bit today on reaching out. And that's by no means, you know, there's all sorts of other nuances and factors to consider in that, but that's just kind of a brief. This is what happened. This is what I did. This is the effect, and these are some of my observations. So I'm going to leave you guys with that today. I do hope that this video has helped. If there's anybody who's struggled with that as I have. The quick wrap up, of course, the ride goes from the 1st of June to the 1st or 31st of August. I'll be riding all across Canada. I am looking to connect with veterans and first responders affected by PTSD. So get into the description below. You'll see where I'm going to be and when. There'll be more info coming on how you can keep track of me while I'm on the move. Just come on out and say hey. You know, we don't even have to talk. Just come out and connect. If you are a veteran or a first responder affected by PTSD and you are ready and willing to go on camera and share your story, share your observations as, you know, as I just did, or, you know, to be interviewed on camera, then definitely get in touch. I definitely want to connect with you this summer because I'm looking for 26 veterans and first responders who are willing to share their story. At this date, I have 2. So really going to ask you to push that out to your networks. Looking for people willing to share their story and lend their voice to their peers in breaking down the stigma surrounding PTSD. All right, guys, I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much. Take care.